Months after a Chinese spy balloon was shot down while flying over American airspace, another mysterious balloon was spotted off the coast of Hawaii as three US Air Force F-22 Raptor stealths scrambled to intercept the balloon before deciding it was no real threat. In Oropeza, Texas, 5 people at home were shot dead by a man armed with an AR-15 style rifle in a series of execution-style shootings. And as the US presidential primaries loom, Democrats like Robert Kennedy Jr., Kamala Harris, Gretchen Wenmer, and Joe Biden, who will be 86, begin their fight for the Oval Office. Joining us is our North American and European correspondent, Michael Charbon. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Ben, welcome. First of all, welcome to you, our first time together here on The Informer. Our executive producer, George Haslam, spoke very kindly of you and of your capabilities. So I'm very much looking forward of us meeting on a weekly basis here. Your summation at the top was very true. There was another balloon that was spotted over Hawaii. It's of unknown origin, but they're pretty sure it's not Chinese. It flew over Hawaii, and they believe it's now going towards Mexico. The little bit of the scary thing is that it has a propulsion system, but no payload. And they say that it doesn't have any aviation threats to commercial aircraft. But you, of course, Ben, you're well aware of the fact of what went down between Canada and the United States with the last Chinese balloon. So everybody's a little bit hypersensitive to this. Again, another balloon over top. Today we had more tragic news coming from Atlanta in a daylight shooting in Atlanta. It was about 12:30 in downtown Atlanta. There was 4 people who were injured and 1 person dead. They were all females. They're all working at a medical facility. An African-American man in an AR-14 went in there and shot people. They're still looking for this individual. And unfortunately, gun crime and mass shooting has been something of a grave concern in the United States. Last week in Texas, there was a mass shooting. What went on was there was one house where they had a bunch of illegal immigrants, but there was many children and women and men in this one single house. They were trying to go to bed, and the guy next door had an AR-15 and was firing it blatantly at the front of his house, making noise. So the man went over to ask the guy with the gun to stop shooting because he's keeping the kids awake. They had a little bit of an argument. The man returns to his house. 5 minutes later, the gentleman with the gun, no gentleman, the monster with the gun walks over and executes 5 people, including a 9-year-old child. Now, this guy, Francis Oropeza, he was deported from the United States 4 times. So 4 times he was escorted out of the country and he came back. And it's just an absolute tragic scenario. The good thing is they found this guy. And the second thing that's a good thing is they have the death penalty in Texas. And it's generally enforced to anybody who kills anyone under the age of 10. But what a lot of patriots and Republicans are saying is that this is a situation where an open borders policy has allowed this guy to be deported 4 times. And how in heaven's name did he get a gun? And he didn't get it legally. So obviously, this again purports there is a problem in the United States with respect to guns. But it's not only guns. The final little piece in this little segment is bankruptcies. I mean, several weeks ago, or several months ago, I should say, you had the Silicon Valley Bank that went bankrupt. Then you had Signature Bank. Well, last week, it's First Republican Bank. This is one of the largest independent banks in America. And it's one of those situations, Ben, where it's too big to fail, but too small to succeed. These regional banks fund independent business owners, and independent business owners in America are the largest employers. So it was absolutely tragic. The Federal Deposit Insurance Agency, the FDIC, took over the bank, and basically, for all intents and purposes, they told JP Morgan Chase that they had to buy them out. So the depositors and the businesses' deposits are insured because they got JP Morgan Chase involved. But any of the shareholders and the bondholders are out to lunch. Nothing's going to happen. And JP Morgan Chase is basically the largest bank in America. They have $90 billion in deposits, and they own 10% of American deposits, worth about $30 billion. So when the banking industry, Ben, gets a little shaky in the United States, a lot of people get shaky because they had a run on cash. So Just
Yeah, the banking one I find really interesting. I mean, I've always had a huge interest in American culture and sport and politics. You know, I'm a huge NFL fan and, you know, follow it religiously here in Australia. And then, you know, over the years have, you know, come to understand the US a lot more. But I think in Australia, and going back to, I suppose, starting with the gun issue, here in Australia, I find, and I think a lot of my peers would say it as well, we struggle to understand gun culture in America. You know, it is, you know, here we had obviously the Port Arthur tragedy a number of years ago. And after that, you know, guns were, you know, bad news. The laws changed. There was a lot of handing in of guns or the surrendering of firearms. But in America, you can wear a firearm, you know, legally. But then you have the issue, as you said, you have the issue where you have, you know, somebody that's come in from you know, outside the US still able to get a gun and then do as much damage as they did, you know. And
but the American population is 350 million people. They have 450 million guns.
Yeah.
The gun right is something which is an indelible right in their constitution.
Yeah,
the right to bear arms. And the reason that they have the right to bear arms is that so it goes back to basically the war with England, that England was going to come over and take over the United States. And if Americans didn't have guns to defend themselves, they wouldn't be able to have the America that they have today. And because it's part of their constitution, and you also have to remember, America has one of the largest armies in the world. And once they finish serving in the army, you can get an education, you can earn a career in the army, and then you come out. They are a gun culture. They have vast amounts of forest. They hunt. They have vast amounts of rural area with farmers. They hunt. They've got guns. The problem is it's illegal guns. And the people who are creating the majority of the shootings, much of it is black on black crime, and criminals don't register guns. No. And that's part of the problem. Now they're getting into red flag laws where they're looking at people if they have any mental problems. There's questions, background checks. If you have a felony and you're not allowed to have a gun, you go to jail. So those elements are going to have to be enforced more. But where the contentious issue is something like an AR-14. An AR-14 is not a military rifle. An AR-14 is a gun. It's a hunting gun for all intents and purposes. What people do is buy add-ons like they would do to modify a car to make it look like an AK-47. And there are many sport shooters and many shooters in rural areas who hunt swine and wild boar. So it's not the gun that kills, it's the person who pulls the trigger. And this is where there's a huge disconnect in the States.
Yeah, and I mean, it's that constitutional right that, you know, I understand, you know, that it's obviously, you know, there's so many illegal firearms coming through the US, but it's that constitutional right. And it comes back, I think, a little bit to, you know, you have so much power of the gun lobby, you know, within the US, but also you have, you know, that right to bear arms is an interpretive thing in modern politics. You know, in modern politics, it's worth so much money, and the American people are saying it's in our constitution. But it didn't actually mean, as you said, it didn't actually mean that when they implemented that into the constitution. It was to protect their country. But now there has been this adaptation of this, you know, a couple of 100 years old constitution where it's just been taken totally out of context, and then is growing.
Well, I'm going to tell you, the amount of armed robberies that take place in Texas are few and far between.
Is that because
you're going to sit there? Sorry?
Is that because it's controlled more?
No, because people in the restaurant have a gun. And if Buddy wants to come in and thinks that he's going to draw a firearm and rob the guy in the store and take everybody's phone and wallet, you're not going to get very far in Texas, because Buddy behind you is going to have a gun and he's going to defend himself.
Do you find
That's
it
one
terrifying?
Of the situations that a lot of people realize of a gun culture.
Do you find it terrifying sometimes being in the US with that kind of culture?
So I live in Toronto, Canada, and what our problem is all the illegal guns that come into Canada are brought in from the United States.
Yeah,
I will tell you, I am more fearful walking down a street in New York and seeing some of the people that are walking around there not knowing if they have a gun. And interestingly enough, Chicago, which has some of the hardest and most severe gun laws in all of America, is basically the death capital of the United States. There are hundreds of deaths per month, all shootings, and they have the toughest gun laws. So sometimes you wonder about, I can remember traveling in Florida when I was younger, and I walked into a girlfriend's father's car, and I thought that one of the tires was low, and I wanted to look. I looked at the gun in the glove compartment. There's a loaded 45 in the glove compartment. She's looking at me going, yeah, so? I mean,
you probably.
I'm going, holy Christmas. But it's a different consciousness. I mean, if you ask the average Canadian, have they fired a firearm, they will say no. If you ask the average American if they fired a firearm, they will say yes.
Yeah, and it's staggering. It's just another world that I can't comprehend. Banks. I mean, we looked at 2008. We saw, credit default swaps and banks over leveraged and debt everywhere. They just got greedy again this time round.
Well, they're over leveraged. I mean, what happened was a lot of these banks that went bankrupt, there was a run on cash. I mean, all you need is one person to go down and someone to go and get a run on the bank. And I want to take my $100,000 out. And the bank says, well, you're going to have to wait 5 days because we've got to get the cash. What? And then all of a sudden I'm having a run getting my money out of the bank. Everybody kind of goes, oh my God, I better get my money out of the bank.
Yeah,
they're very highly leveraged. They don't have the cash on hand. And that's what happened with Silicon Valley Bank. They got to run on cash. They couldn't come up with it, and they had to close things down. I mean, there was an old situation in America. The banks are not run in the same way as Canada is, for instance. Our banks are controlled by the federal government and guaranteed by the federal government. You just can't open a bank. No. In the United States, if you and I, Ben, wanted to open a bank, we could open a bank. They have thousands of independent banks. Yeah. But it is those independent banks that are intimately aware of local businesses and the local business owners that lend the money that give the power to start businesses. And it is those independent businesses which are the largest employers. So there's a bit of a train that goes on there. And unfortunately, as soon as you have one that starts to go, everybody else gets a little teetery. And that's where you had Silicon Valley, a Signature, and then now the third bank that just went under. I mean, it's a First Republican is one of those ones, like they said, it's too big to fail, but too small to succeed. And it's a very dangerous situation.
Yeah, I did read about, that I heard that exact same line, too big. But it just, I mean, from what you're saying, it's sort of, this time we know, with the likes of Lehman Brothers last time around 2008, credit default swaps, they were just lending money to people's cats. It was just ridiculous. Correct. But this time, banks have, and I mean, here in Australia as well, banks, I think, have learnt their lessons, and, Australia is very indicative of what's happening in the US. But you have, one of our biggest banks here in Australia, National Australia Bank, despite inflation sitting at 7% here at the moment, mortgage holders of the average Australian struggling. I mean, my wife and I's mortgage has gone up, 50% in the last year alone. NAB has posted I think it was a $5 billion profit. And you go, okay, what do we, we've got people struggling to pay mortgages, and yes, okay, they were perhaps over leveraged from the start, but there was from our RBA here, there was a guarantee as we came out of COVID, interest rates won't go up, and that was from the governor of the RBA. And now here we are, 11 rate hikes later, and people going, what's going on? But with your smaller banks or mid-sized banks are trying to protect small business and but have been unable to do it. Does the government step in that case? I mean, you have, Morgan Stanley, as you say, a huge bank, being able to cover some of that.
In Canada, the government does guarantee, I think it's up to $150,000 per person. But our banks, again, they're under much tighter regulation. They're under much tighter scrutiny because it is the federal government that oversees them and basically has some level of control. So they will never get far out of line, as one would say. Yeah. And I think part of the problem was that many of the American banks were over leveraged. overlended, and they didn't have the collateral cash to support what they were claiming as having deposits or depositors. And that's where a bit of the problem comes, because as soon as there's a run on cash, that's where they begin to have problems, because they're over leveraged.
Do you think it'll get worse? I mean, people here, I mean, I'm sure it's you know, cash is, you know,
Ben, we're going to have a slight recession. I don't care what anybody says. I think we're going to have a slight recession. And the reason being is that, I mean, to skip to our last topic, I'll just inject that now. Yeah. You look at the labor strikes that are going on in France. There's 1.3 million people now. And they're all labor. It's all labor who are all demonstrating in the streets of Paris. And the reason they're demonstrating is because Macron wanted to raise retirement rate from 62 to 64. So they're losing. I mean, it's like Black Lives Matter riots that were in America in the 2019 era. They're setting things on fire. There's no garbage collection. All the civil services are on strike. So basically, they're trying to shut the country down. And they have a huge amount of debt that they have to service. They have a lot of illegal immigration as well. And basically, Macron is saying that he's not going to be able to have people retire at 62. They've got to work till those 64. And if you compound that from a perspective of what's happening in Europe, I mean, goodness gracious, Pakistan is almost broke. They went to the international IMF, the International Bank, to get more money. They weren't going to lend them more billions. The rupee's worth nothing. Their people are starving. Look at Turkey. Turkey was already in a state of dismal economic condition, and then the earthquake hit. And now add on top of that, Russia's ruthless war against the Ukraine, and what has happened with respect to transportation, to oil, to electricity, to everything. I mean, all these things are all factors which are going to lead to a recession, or at least a slight recession. And if America doesn't get their ponies in order, and with all due respect to any Democrats out there, if they don't get a Republican government involved in the United States, look at all the countries that are going now against the American dollar, etc. There's going to be a real problem. There's going to be a real problem. And I think globally, there was a lot of money that went out to help people because of COVID. And as they said in I think it was a Disney movie, you got to pay the piper. And now people are starting to realize what it is. There's layoffs. Companies are shutting down. There's more people who are working from home. So any type of real estate, commercial real estate, is being devalued because people aren't going in as much. Those businesses who service those commercial real estate areas, the dry cleaners, the variety stores, the donut shops, the restaurants, they're not seeing the volume of people. They're going under as well. This is what's starting to happen. There's going to be a tide of problems, Ben.
I mean, I always sort of saw that the end of the Second World War.
Excuse me.
I always sort of saw the end of the Second World War as, you know, a time, you know, the 1950s and then going into the 1960s, a time of huge prosperity and reassessment of life and what people were doing. And I always, you know, from a positive point of view, you know, the world was devastated by COVID, and, you know, we wanted the post-COVID world to be our opportunity, or this generation's opportunity, to facilitate profound change. But instead of that, we seem to have a lot of leftist governments in control across the world now, who are more concerned about, you know, various woke agendas and this and that, or, you know, we've got to be all inclusive, and at the detriment of what real economics is about, of what we're actually doing to, you know, to really make change, you know. And the change now, instead of it being for the betterment and quite profound, it's desperate change. The world is in desperate need of change. And leaving aside whatever Trump does, Biden does, you know, what happens in Ukraine, this, that, everything, what happens here, we've got to do something. You know, we are, as you say, you know, and I'm sure you know, you're much more knowledgeable about me than me on a number of things. But I would have thought that Blind Freddy could start to see that if this whole leftist agenda keeps going, and I don't mean that from a conspiracy point of view, I mean it from a general economic hardcore point of view, if we don't see change, then we are in serious trouble.
I agree with you. I'm going to quickly get to our next 2 points, because I think our executive producer is going to say we're going to ramble on. We want to keep our informed viewers still with us. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now just about the election as it's coming to fore in the United States, because as many people say, when America sneezes, Canada and generally the world catches a cold. So with the election now coming in 2024, 60% of Americans say no to Trump and 70% of Americans say no to Biden. Trump's in a bunch of legal problems now, and I mean he's got Bragg in New York, who's got him up against charges for Stormy Daniels payments, which is 30 years old, which is a flagrant BS political thing. He's also right now on trial for rape. Over 40 years ago, a woman is accusing him of rape. I don't know what the outcome is going to be in that. He said, she said. The one that could have a little bit of traction is another one in New York where the Trump Corporation is being sued. There's another one that may be of some sort, which is in Florida with Mar-a-Lago, with the classified documents when they went and looked in Mar-a-Lago. But the hair on the tennis ball, if you wish, on that is the same hair that's on Biden's documents that were found in the garage. So I think that's going to go by the wayside. So other than Trump claiming that he's going to run or announcing that he's going to run for the Republicans, some of the other contenders who are formally committed is Nikki Haley. She's a former Carolina governor and the U.S. ambassador. She was under Trump. Vivek Ramaswamy, who is under 40, East Indian gentleman. He's a multimillionaire. He's an author, very successful. I don't think he has a chance. I don't think Nikki Haley has a chance either, but they will get cabinet positions of some sort because they're making all the tours and doing some good speaking about it. Asa Hutchinson is another one. He's a two-term governor in Arkansas. Again, another also ran. Larry Elder has also announced. He actually ran against Gavin Newsom when they had the recall in California. He wasn't successful, but very well-respected, knowledgeable gentleman. Again, not really a contender. The real contender has yet to say that he's going to run, and that's Ron DeSantis, the former governor of Florida, who has not said that, but he's gone through the ammunitions, if you wish, of finding if there's any confidence in having a fundraising area. Mike Pence is the other one, the former vice president under Trump, who has not yet determined that he's going to run. The situation now in the Republicans is, if you look at the comparison between Trump and DeSantis, 53% of Republicans would support Trump and 21% would support DeSantis. So DeSantis is really the culprit here who could push it. From the Democrats, you've got obviously Joe Biden, but guys, Joe Biden's 81 years old this year. He's going to be 86 if he serves a second term. He already has huge cognitive problems. I mean, you can look on the internet, you see him falling, you see him stuttering, making false proclamations, outright lying about things. And then he fell asleep when the Israeli minister came over to the White House. He fell asleep when the Russian minister was talking. This is all on camera. I mean, this is an embarrassment. And if it's anything like his COVID basement stuff, where he never did press conferences, never talked to anybody, it's going to be a terrible situation. And if Kamala Harris is going to be his vice president, Biden's approval rating in the United States is about 36%. Kamala's is 31%. So it's not like if poor Mr. Biden gets elected and he's 81 and something untoward happens, which we don't wish, we wish him well, but that Kamala Harris would come in to save the day on a white horse, I mean, we've lost it all. So, and also right now, he's also got the problems with Hunter Biden, who, we had all that laptop thing and money laundering and all the rest of that. Hunter wasn't paying child support, so the lady called him into court. So Hunter goes into court and says to the judge, I don't have any money. So the judge says, okay, then we're going to look at your finances. Uh-oh, foot in the mouth, because there's all these Republicans who are trying to find out where all those multi-millions of dollars went to. Now they're going to be able to do it because of this civil thing that's going. So it's a mess. It's a mess. Marianne Williamson and basically Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are the two that have announced that they would run against Biden. Marianne Williamson, she was a spiritual advisor to Oprah, and she's a self-help author. No chance. She's smart and nice, but ain't going to happen. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he's the nephew of President John F. Kennedy. Currently, he holds 19% as far as Democrats are concerned. But there's a heck of a lot of runway, Ben, between now and when primaries are going to happen. And I'm gonna suggest to you that if I was going to make a prediction now, Trump is not going to be the Republican. It's going to be DeSantis and someone like Mickey Nome, the governor of South Dakota, as a vice president. And I would say Kennedy, because Kennedy has a little bit of movement. He is not a strict and leftist Democrat. He's a little more centrist. And if he plays his cards right, he could get some of the Republicans over to his side. But I don't see Biden running, and I don't see Trump running. I think Americans have had Trump. I think they're looking for a new horse to run in this race.
You don't see Biden running?
No. I mean, if they want to make Biden run, he will be crucified. He can't even answer press questions. How the heck is he going to answer a debate? He can't even get his name straight. He doesn't know how to exit on a stage. I mean, I'm sorry. With all due respect, the man deserves the respect of the service that he gave America. I give him that due. But, sir, please, there was a time and a place when you have to say, you know what, folks, I love you, but I'm going to take it easy. He's not running America. He's a puppet. There are other people making him run. He can't even read a teleprompter properly. And when he tries to vibe on something or vamp on something, he starts saying, I was in the Korean War 4 times. And you're like, what? It's stuff like that. It's terrible. You get eviscerated on television. No way.
I do. I mean, we saw Paul McCartney at Glastonbury last year, at 80. And you sort of thought, well, that was probably the end for Sir Paul. And, thank you so much. And but you go, how does an 85-year-old run one of the biggest economies in the world?
I mean, for God's sake, take your time. What are you trying to prove? So I got one more point, and then we should wrap this up, or George is going to lose it. We're going to see the coronation of a king at the end of this week. King Charles III is going to be coronated in Westminster Abbey on May the 6th. It's estimated, I got to give you, it's estimated worldwide that they're going to sell $132 million worth of memorabilia. Cups and napkins and doilies and all the rest of that. Now, you think $132 million, that's a lot of money, right? That's a lot of money. Yep. Do you know what they're estimating to sell inside the UK alone? $2.3 billion. I mean, it's unreal. So the last time there was a coronation was in 1953, which was, television was very, very new. Film was very, very new, as I would Queen Elizabeth. So Charles currently is the 5th most popular monarch, and he holds about 55% of the popularity in the UK. And interestingly enough, Charles was kind of living in the shadow of his mother. If you can imagine, you're going to be king one day, you're going to be king one day, you're going to be king one day. And it's tough, right? So he was becoming a bit of a rebel. And if you look at him compared to his rebel younger son, Prince Harry, there are many similarities of the two. Here he was forced into a marriage to Diana because they wanted a young woman. He was still in love with Camilla Parker Bowles, and that was part of the reason that they got divorced. In the end, he married the Queen Consort, Camilla Parker Bowles, and that eventually worked its way out. And I think Britain now has come to the liking because she's played everything well and she's been very good. So basically, the chain of command in the hierarchy now will be King Charles III with the Queen Consort, Camilla Parker Bowles, beside him. The next in line is Prince William with his wife Kate, and then their son George, who would be the next. So for the next 3 monarchy changes, it's going to be God Save the King. And just for any interest, Harry's not coming. Harry's coming for 2 hours, and Meghan's not coming because she's babysitting. He's flying over, seeing the coronation, not getting too involved, getting on a plane, going back to California. That, Ben, is your wrap-up on North American and U.S.
Michael, thank you very much, and we'll see you again.
Pleasure.
Thanks, man.